That cow obviously is nursing that calf. That's hers. I would imagine that all three of these adults are related in some way, and this matriarch would be the one that decides what the herd does for the day. She decides which direction they go in, what food they're after, when they come to drink, when they move on, how they avoid other animals, what they do when there's danger around. She makes all the decisions, and everyone learns from her. And when there's too many adult females, in other words, when her oldest children grow up and have children of their own, and they start having children, when the herd size gets to between 12 and about 20 individuals, the herd will split and a new matriarch will be formed. And that's the way that elephant populate areas. They break up into ever smaller and smaller groups, coming together when there's a shared resource. Not quite sure how big the herd size of elephant get in Madikwe, but I know that I've seen elephant herds of 50 plus in the Kruger National Park, and I've seen conglomerations of elephant way over 100 on the Chobe River in Botswana. And so they do actually come together and form rather large aggregations of elephant. For those of you who don't know what these antelope are in front of us, they are impala, and they're male impala because they've got horns. The females don't have any horns. And these are all the boys together. They have a bachelor herd. Oh, Steve, you've asked an interesting question. Is a male elephant born without tusks at a disadvantage? I would say so. Tusks are used to joust with one another, and strength of their tusks and the ability to inflict an injury when it comes down to it is the difference between one elephant of the same size and another elephant of the same size, and aggression. Um, and so I would imagine that an elephant bull that's born without tusks is at an absolute disadvantage when their size and their shape and their aggression is matched. So two elephants of the same size, same aggression, uh, sort of same hierarchy will joust with one another, and that's when the most deadly of the matchups between elephants occur. And it's at this point where I think that the disadvantage would be felt. If a massive elephant had to come into this area now and he had no tusks, and the only other bull elephant was a smaller elephant with smaller tusks, I actually think that the bigger bull elephant would have the advantage. They wrestle pushing heads together, and it would be immediately apparent when one elephant is bigger and stronger than another, and the smaller one will almost always give way, in my experience at least, anyway. Here in the background, we've got a giraffe. You just see that very distinct profile sticking up there at the forest end. And that giraffe is still feeding. That's why it's there in the trees. They're browsers, and they will pick at the trees and the leaves. Very selective feeder. And will go about filling their rumen before probably coming for a drink or resting up under the shade in the heat of the day to regurgitate small portions of food out of their rumen that they collected through the morning and chewing the cud, and then getting active again late afternoon. Here's another. So this is another herd of elephant. Looks like it's coming in. We've got we've got what looks to be two herds of elephant here joining one another. Again, I'm not I haven't operated for long periods of time in Madikwe at all. And so elephant dynamics are different from place to place. And what you read in a book or in a report in one area doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be the same in a, so, just from one keen naturalist to other keen naturalists out there, um, there's never a hard and fast rule about what will apply. There's only sort of generalizations and observations from people's experience, scientific study. But this definitely looks like one or two old females with their offspring, and so two herds. But let's keep on watching and see what we can see. It's interesting that we're seeing them picking at the ground like that. There must be some quite tasty morsel there on the ground that they're interested in. Impala are also after the same thing. Amazing what these animals find in the dry, actually, and how resilient they are to highly fluctuating food levels. I don't think people in general are as resilient as what wildlife is, to be honest with you. I mean, that's obvious, but humans have always prided themselves on being quite adaptable. I don't think we're quite this adaptable, frankly. One of the beauties of the Live at the Waterhole show is that we've got cameras like this all over Africa and the ability to swap between them at will. And so, what we're going to be doing now is jumping a couple of thousand kilometers north and east into East Africa and going to go and have a look at Afrikaans Aldonio. And just like that, four countries further north and a couple of thousand kilometers, and we've got Afrikaans Aldonio camera in the Great Plains Conservancy up in southern Kenya, a massive conservancy, well over 100,000 hectares, which is a quarter of a million acres. And in contrast to the females and their offspring, which you're looking at, here we have two enormous bull elephant. This pan yesterday was literally sucked dry. We couldn't see water anymore from our vantage point where we're at now. By the time five bull elephant had finished having their drink at this particular waterhole yesterday, and I see that it's managed to fill up overnight, thankfully. And now we have these two big boys that have come in, and just look at the size of their bodies compared to those females. You can just get this huge sense of power and bulk. There's a third elephant coming in. Whoop, he got a bit of a fright there. Didn't quite like to be surprised there by that elephant. Gosh, it always surprises me how light they are on their feet when an elephant moves like that. How competent and athletic they actually are. Not these cumbersome, lumbering beasts that, their slow gait and calm demeanor, generally speaking, would highlight. Listen carefully to the slurp and the slosh of the water as they suck it up and blow it into their mouth. Interesting the color of these elephants. Oh, here we got a giraffe that's moved in. They range from the color of the elephant. They range from white, the elephant on the left-hand side, to this rusty reddish brown color on the right-hand side, and that's just the dust that they've been bathing themselves with. And I would imagine that these two elephants have been in some different areas over the last couple of hours, days. Some Maasai giraffe just keeping their distance. You'll notice that there's a distinct difference in size between this elephant on the left and the two younger bulls on the right hand side. As elephants get older, around 45 years plus, they actually start to calcify their skulls a lot quicker, and so their skeletons get bigger, and they pick up mass quite quickly. And you can see that there's a distinct difference between that elephant at the back and these ones in the front, and he would be the one that commands the greatest presence around breeding herds, and for a few years will hold the prime spot. Him and others like him. The elephants that end up covering cows are generally massive, like this one is massive in body, massive in tusks. Very dominant and big. And these youngsters, they just learn from them. Wrestle, learn what to do, what not to do, how to behave, how not to behave. It's an incredible sight of three enormous bull elephants in southern Kenya, drinking from this waterhole. From the looks of things, the big elephant on the left, he's the dominant bull, he's the big guy, and he's joined by his two askari, as they call him in this area, or companions, on the right-hand side, which are slightly younger elephant. I would imagine that these elephants are in their teens, looks like in their late teens, early 20s. Tough to say, actually, but that's what they look like. And we have some giraffes that have sort of been parading around in the background, some Maasai giraffes that have been parading around in the background. I had this analogy in my head. It's like sitting in a shopping center at a specific point and just waiting for things to come past and just watching, observing. And that's exactly what we're doing from the vantage points of these cameras, is we're just watching and observing. Such a great thing. We've noticed that in two spots, the spot that both elephants are using now, the elephant they concentrate around these spots. Definitely the one is an inlet, a water inlet, because we've seen elephant drinking from that. So the one on the left, the big guy, he's commandeered the fresh water inlet from this water point. It is a pumped pan, which is not an issue. Artificial water points have needed to be put in because even though these wilderness areas are absolutely massive, Africa is fragmented, and elephants don't have the freedom of movement, or animals don't have the freedom of movement they used to have, and so you're needing to make a plan every now and again. And artificial water points are a common thing, but it allows us infrastructure like we've got now with the cameras, and of course gives us such a great view. Look at this, lifting his head. Something's caught his attention there. Let's see what he does. Is this a big elephant? Is he moving across? Getting irritated with that youngster close to him? Or is there something further afield? Are we going to see another big bull elephant come into the picture? Or a herd of elephant? No water wasted at this point. Right now, they're just filling their bellies with water for their living purposes, so for hydration and for metabolism. But we can expect them to start having a bath, perhaps not this early in the morning, but definitely for the elephant coming a little bit later in the day. As the temperature picks up, they'll wet the back of their ears first, and sometimes their flanks and their belly and top of their head, and that's in an effort to cool down. Staying within an optimum range of temperatures is a tough thing for a warm-blooded animal. Humans are very, very good at maintaining our environments where we function best. Animals are not always that lucky or not always able to do that. And one of the ways that they help cool themselves down, these big guys, is by wetting the backs of their ears and their flanks and using the breeze to cool the blood down. Oh, here we go. This is perhaps what the elephant was hearing. Yep. The zebra trying to come in for a drink and just finding these big boys a little bit too intimidating. Very healthy looking animals. Gosh, there's something great about a zebra. I love seeing zebra. The pajama donkey of Africa. Steve, you wanted to know what the source of the water is at the Old Donya Waterhole. Um, Tough to say. I don't know, actually. We can always find out, but it's most probably one of two sources. Either it is pumped from a river nearby, or it is pumped out of the ground from a borehole nearby. Both are feasible, both happen. Um, and so pans close to lodges are usually pumped from tanks that are kept close to the camp for camp's water sources, and the pipe is just laid out to the pan. But depending on how remote the water hole is, you might find that they have to dig a water point, or pump water from a river into a pan, and so this will be one of either of those things. They've got such strong jaws, these zebra. If you have a look at that massive cheekbone, it's an attachment point for a muscle. It helps them close their jaw and swing it from side to side so that they can chew the grass that they like to eat into fine particles. Zebra and elephant share the same digestive system. They are both hindgut fermenters, bulk grazers, relatively speaking, obviously, and are able to ingest large quantities of relatively poor quality grass, and so can live in a much wider range of habitats. They're not as specific as something like an oryx or a springbuck would be. And so you find zebra all the way from literally the tip of South Africa all the way through the savannas of East Africa, dry harshness of Etosha, Namibia, and Namib, straight through the Kalahari, not in true forests, but very close to the edges. how tattered and raggedy the edges of these elephants' ears are. And, as we were discussing yesterday, I think, or the day before, the skin on the elephant's ears represents roughly 20% of the total skin surface area of an elephant's body. And so there's a lot of real estate up there. And years of flapping and being dragged through bush, thorns, and branches tear their ears. And if you have a look at the big bull on the left hand side, you'll notice that he's torn his ears on both sides, both left and right. And that could have happened at any time in his life, and most probably through tusks. So wrestling with other males, whether it was just in play or whether it was actually quite serious, it's tough to say at this point. But quite often, as a bull wrestles with a head and then turns, one bull turns and the other one thrusts forward, they leave their neck and flank exposed, and the ears are casualties of that quite often. We saw an oryx briefly, there we go, between the two elephants. That's the eastern oryx, the East African oryx, and then of course a Maasai giraffe. Very different to the giraffe that we saw in Madikwe as we opened the show. That was a giraffe that only rarely occurs in South Africa, a little bit further north of that, but not in East Africa. The giraffe we're looking at now, they're all Maasai giraffe. I think the activity now is getting a little bit much for these elephants. You can see, what are they doing? Why are you reversing from a giraffe? Also, another interesting observation. Oh no, I thought that this elephant in the middle had some damage to his trunk, but in actual fact, it was just the angle we were looking. His trunk is perfectly fine. How funny things these elephants. They get themselves wound up about the funniest things. This elephant on the right is not going to chase this giraffe. He doesn't like him anywhere close to his. See how he opened his ears and took a step towards him? Now he's going to follow this giraffe out of the shot. He's making sure that he stamps his authority over this waterhole. It's his patch of water for now. Bully. They definitely don't like sharing, that's for sure. This big guy, he doesn't want to share any of the fresh water coming out of the inlet there. He just wants to keep it all for himself. We just had this really big eland walk in, come for a drink. And when he walks off in the next couple of seconds or so, see if on your audio feed you can hear their knees clicking. Big eland bulls like this have a characteristic of clicking knees, and it's a tendon that rubs over their wrist joints. Listen carefully. You might still drink a little bit. They're big animals. We're looking at 600 to 1,000 kilograms, 1,200 to 2,000 pounds roughly. Okay, listen. See if he walks back up to the water now that things have calmed down. Did you hear those clicking? Oh, that clicking. Did you hear those clicking? Gosh, excuse my English today. Such a majestic animal, these eland. They are huge. I was lucky enough to work in an environment where there was a lot of eland. And having worked with these eland before, well, not worked with them, but lived in areas where they've been common, the environments that they live in are sometimes quite extraordinary. They love in the wet season or in summer to frequent mountains, remote areas where you'd never think such a big animal would live, and definitely not in the numbers that they do. And then in the winter time, in the colder, drier times of the year, they form these herds, rather large herds on plains, and they just pour out of the hills. You don't know where they've been hiding the whole year. And yet they're all over the place, finding tracks everywhere. They get around, these guys. They're definitely not shy of moving. Highly revered for their power and their grace and their beauty. And then also by hunter-gatherers for their meat. Important animals to have around. Welcome back to some of you after a short break. And if you've just rejoined the show or joining the show, you with Steph Winterboer. I'm your naturalist for this morning. We're all the way up in East Africa, in southern Kenya, at Africam's Old Donyo camera, close to Amboseli National Park. And this part of Africa, along with the Kruger National Park, revered for having some of the biggest tusked bull elephants in Africa, in the world, I was going to say, but more specifically in Africa, since you don't find African elephants anywhere else. Yesterday we had quite an interesting discussion on elephant tusks and how it depends on personal preference what type of tusk you enjoy. I quite enjoy a symmetrical tusk and tusks that show some symmetry between one another. And so the prettiest tusks in this group of elephant for me are the ones in this elephant that has got his back towards us. And that's because they are parallel to each other, evenly. They've got a nice taper. They're not too wide or too splayed. They've got very little damage on them. I don't know, I'm just drawn to that. Whereas some of you might enjoy that big guy at the back there who's got not the biggest tusk we've ever seen on an elephant at this pan, but definitely not small by any means. Give you an idea of how thick that tusk is, the one coming out of that elephant's lip, the big one on the left-hand side. If you circle your thigh, upper thigh with your hands, that is around about as thick as what that tusk is. Plus or minus, obviously, depending on your body shape. But that is giving you a fair idea of how thick that tusk is. And the base of the trunk, between the tusks, where it comes out of the skull, is as thick as most people's waists. Give you an idea of, and a little bit thicker, an idea of how thick that and how massive that trunk is. So nice to be able to zoom in like we've just done, and for the quality of the picture coming out of this camera. I imagine that you guys are hearing all the noises associated with this particular location as well. There's a breeze, so you're going to have sticks shuffling. I'm assuming that there's some birds making a call. And then the quiet padfuls of these elephantas. That one is moving across the shot there. See what he's going to do. He's going to come around the side of the pan. Can you see the water tastes better? You'll notice that this elephant's got this ball-like protrusion out of his back leg, and the elephant in the middle has got another similar type of protrusion in the same spot, although a bit smaller, and then also on his trunk. You'll notice that there's these weird sort of bumps. And just like humans, elephant have growths and cysts and all these funny things that we get as we get a little bit older. They have them, just like we do, they have them as well, and that's all that is. It's nothing to be concerned about. Could have been from an old injury, so an abscess of some sort, sebaceous cyst just underneath the skin. Some cases you find on their bellies they can get hernias, especially older females. And then on the trunks of males, quite often they have those injuries, and that's just from them fighting with one another and sharp tusks going into their trunks and causing injuries in that way. He's a bit of a fighter, this male in the middle. In his life, obviously wanting a fair share of the ladies. Definitely looks like an old tusk injury that you can see the way that we've zoomed in there. Quite lovely, thank you. Definitely looks like an injury to me from a tusk. So it's at the same level that a tusk would be. You can see, give you an idea of how they joust us on another pitting strengths. It's terrifying to witness two elephant fighting. The power that they can put down is just off the scale. No harm done. It's not leaking any fluid. We don't see any water coming out of it. Doesn't look like there's any flies buzzing around it. It healed naturally on its own, just leaving a scar. Being this close, we can also see that white glandular secretion in the corner of their eye. I don't see a lot of female elephant with that glandular secretion. You normally only see it on males, but I was reminded of the fact by a viewer, in fact, that it also occurs on females. It's just not as common. And you'll often see elephant wiping it with their trunk. They wipe their eyes, they wipe that gland secretion out. And you'll also see other elephants sniffing it from time to time. They'll put their trunk right up against it and sniff it. Gosh, it's a lovely picture. Amazing when you start zooming out and you zoom in and you realize the dynamic range of these cameras are just amazing. And then you realize where we're coming to from, how remote these wilderness areas are, and the fact that it's live, and then that you can ask me questions. And considering where I'm sitting in relation to these elephants, it's just a bit of a mind blow, actually. This particular angle giving us quite a nice look at the front and the back end of an elephant's ear. Obviously, look when it flaps open the elephant on the right. As the ear joins the body, you'll notice a series of very thick blood vessels there. Not, not quite from this angle, so we'll give it a chance now. And this elephant will turn back our way again. These elephants, or all elephants, they push their blood in their body through their ears, radiates out heat, and they keep themselves cool by flapping their ears. It's not necessarily a sign of aggression. Elephants flapping their ears is quite normal. Cooling them down, sending drafts over their ears. There you go. Big fan. Anthony, you've asked a cool question. What is the average length of a tusk? Anthony, it's highly variable, to be honest with you. There is no, in some areas like Botswana, for instance, elephant tusks are relatively short and stubby because mineral deficiencies in their diet make their tusks brittle, even though they can be quite thick. Areas like where we are now in southern Kenya and in Kruger National Park, the ivory gets very long, but not the longest. The longest ever recorded, one of our viewers sent me a message yesterday saying that the longest tusk ever recorded was 3.5 meters long, which is an enormous tusk. And then also, if you have a look at the female that we saw, or if you remember the female that we saw a little bit earlier in the show, she was tuskless and didn't have any tusks. And so, quite tough to say what the average is for elephant. I would be quite hesitant to even guess at something like that because it's going to be so variable and open to much debate. But we can give you the range. So max 3.5, min 0, and depending on the area, the average of that particular area will be anything really. I know I didn't really answer your question there, Andrew, but hopefully I gave you a better answer than just sprouting out some number that didn't hold any water. Here we've got an animal that we haven't seen at the water before. We've got an olive baboon that's just walked into frame. Gosh, what a surprise. I haven't seen an olive baboon at this camera just yet. As opposed to the chukma baboons that we find in South Africa. The olive baboon, same weight, but a lot hairier and a lot more sort of squat and robust. They almost look like wrestlers or boxers. And then on the coasts of Kenya, you get the yellow baboon as well. So olive baboons common in these sort of savanna bushveld areas in East Africa. Along the coasts of East Africa, you get the yellow baboon, a tall, rangy baboon, but same weight. And then in South Africa, you get the chukma baboon. Oh, here we go. Here's the rest of the troop. Awesome. Baboons like hyena are always busy doing something. And if they're going to stick around in this area, rest assured they're going to come and cause some nonsense with this camera. Still have a view of this olive baboon troop that's busy coming through the shot now. They can actually live in quite large groups together. I've definitely seen dozens of baboons together. In fact, I had quite a scary encounter with olive baboons once. I'll wait until we can see a baboon again, and then I'll share the story with you. We're still in southern Kenya at Africam's old Donyo camera here, close to Amboseli National Park, and we were 3 really big bull elephants, mature. Interestingly, these 2 youngsters, well, relative youngsters, they're obviously adults, but they're young adults, not a mature bull, breeding bull like the one that we're seeing in the center. They follow a very similar path to what adult men do in a way, in that they're sort of highly dependent on their mom and aunties and sisters and cousins, etc., to bring them up until they're about 12 to 15 years old. And then what they start doing is they start being left behind. They either, what's happening now? Head up, ears out, head swaying from side to side. These youngsters definitely are being disturbed by something coming up through the bush. See, there's all these animals moving about. You've got the giraffe in the background. We've just had those baboons walk through now. I think you probably found that this elephant was disturbed by a baboon. knowing that we only saw a small portion of the troop that came through there just now. They can get quite skittish when they hear noises around and they don't know where they come from. Let's see what this giraffe is going to do. The last time a giraffe came this close, this elephant had a bit of a moment and saw him off. Let's see what this giraffe is going to do. He wants to come in to drink, needs to drink. But right now, Pam being dominated by these three methods. Ellies, and that's no chance for someone the size of a giraffe to squeeze a sneaky drink in. Just look at that. Goodness. This is a female giraffe, the one in the front, the one in the back a male. And what he's doing there by licking his lips, and he's just testing her breeding cycle status. So how close she is to estrus. And if she's close, he will stay in attendance. And hopefully, there's a baboon there in the background as well. This is the rest of the troop. This is what I think caught that elephant's attention. I think they were getting a little bit feisty there in the bushes, and he didn't like that so much. This is the rest of the troop coming through there now. Gosh, look at them, man. I had an encounter. I'll come back to the giraffe in a second, but I had an encounter with baboons a few years ago. These olive baboons. I was on a run in Kenya, and I startled the female with a baby, similar to the one that you're seeing there with a baby hanging on her tummy. She got a fright. Oh, look at that one riding there. She got a fright, and the big males, about 5 big males, came running to her aid. Around about the size, maybe a little bit bigger than the ones we're seeing now, these big boys in the front. And effectively herded me away from the female with her baby. She was screaming. She got a big fright, and I came around the corner and shame she didn't know that I was there. And eventually I had to walk through water that contained a hippo and I don't know how many crocodiles to get away from these baboons. I was actually scared they were going to attack me. They were egging one another on, and coming closer and closer and showing me their teeth and bashing the ground. And what struck me at the time was how intimidated I felt by these 5 baboons. And no matter what I did, they were not intimidated by me. Me staring them down, me breaking eye contact, me clapping my hands, shouting, nothing helped. And I've had quite a few encounters with aggressive lions over the years, aggressive elephant. I've always managed to stand my ground, but these baboons were a different story. So nice to see them. Right, back we go to the giraffe. You'll notice that this wants to come in, but this elephant is having none of it. Stop being such bullies. You guys can share your water. You're not even really drinking anymore. You're just picking at the edges. Oh, here we go. Got a baboon coming right up to the camera. Hey, big guy. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if the camera all of a sudden went off. Look at this giraffe going to drink now. He's so thirsty. So uncomfortable and awkward. Trying to have a drink without irritating his nose. Doesn't want to drink, but also at least have the respect. I'm super happy that that giraffe got a good drink and that this baboon didn't put its face into the camera. You know, these cameras, Andrew mentioned he's a viewer, and he mentioned the other day that, you never know what you're going to get when you start in the morning. It's like one of the safaris that we do. You literally just are basically just waiting to see what the bush coughs up, and there's always something new to see and some mix of something to see and to learn. Some things you know, some things you don't know, some things are unusual, some things are common. I just love the fact that we come out on these adventures and we just don't know what we're going to get. He's come back with some more. This is the female. She's coming in now for a drink. Cautiously just bending down, getting low down. Eland coming in. The female. Just having a drink. Let this elephant behave. More giraffe. More eland. Look here in the background, we've got a massive bull elephant coming. Gosh, it's busy here. Enormously tusked bull who's probably going to chase these other bulls away from the water. Let's see. Hold tight, it's going to get exciting. And boom, the big elephant meets the big elephant. Let's see who's the king of the waterhole here. Let's see what's going to happen. You're going to be witnessing something quite special here. The establishment of hierarchy. Let's see what this big guy decides to do. Will he let this other elephant in? Will the other elephant dominate? Yeah. There you go. Subtle, but definite. This little guy's going to have a quick sip and then he's going to have to move on, because this big guy's going to come in and chase him away from the water. Let's see what happened there. Goodness. What a sighting. Let's see if we can go left a little, if you don't mind, and have a look at the interaction between the elephants around the water. Great that we got these really big eland herd. There you go. Okay, so this male with olive food. No. So this big tusked bull, he came in and without much fuss established himself as the dominant bull and went straight to the purest water source, sort of just put himself over it, and in that way he's saying that he is the highest in this particular place. He's the highest in the hierarchy right now out of these elephant here. And all of that done without a word being said. This baboon, I'm just milling around here, freaking everyone out. Steve, I think it was you who asked a little bit earlier, is a male elephant at a disadvantage when they don't have tusks? And here you can quite clearly see that even though this elephant has only one tusk and it's fairly large, and but one-sided, that he'd be vulnerable on the side that he doesn't have tusks. He's definitely more dominant than the elephant bull, the big guy with the slightly smaller tusks. And at least from my point of view, I don't know if you've seen, but at least from my point of view, the big tusked bull doesn't look like he's as big body bulk wise as the big guy on the right hand side. I don't know if it was maybe just the perspective we're getting from the camera, but I don't know. Make up your own mind and see why you think it is that the elephant with a single large tusk was more dominant than the big guy that we're seeing with an injury on his trunk. So many animals around this pan. We've had oryx and baboon in the background, sort of ceaseless procession of Maasai giraffe, and now we've got the Cape eland. A herd being spooked by what is probably just the antics of a olive baboon troop that is hanging around. These baboons are like naughty kids. Uh, as our office team obviously saying to me now that like baboons don't want to miss out on any of the action. They also need their time in the sun. Some young eland coming in skittishly. Parlor in the background. Oryx. Well, look at the way that this giraffe walks. It's called pacing. They walk all their legs on the left hand side of the body, then all their legs on the right hand side of the body, contrasted to the way this elephant walks. Different, eh? Now, camels and hyena also walk with that same way that the giraffe walks. All the legs on the left hand side of the body, then all the legs on the right hand side of the body. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if any of you who watch the show have ever noticed that. But interestingly, although I'd been watching a hyena for years, I never knew that a hyena did it as well. This big guy now, he's now come back into drinking at the prime spot. Some interesting politics going on here with these bull elephants, I must be honest with you. Why are you back? The big guy didn't drink nearly enough. You've been sucking at this pipe for 45 minutes already. How thirsty can you be? Such a great view there. See how sharp those tusks are. How wrinkled his forehead is. How powerful he is. Huge skull. I'm imagining that you can see the eyelashes on his eyes. Yeah, you can see his eyelashes. Protection against the sticks and the thorns, helping keep his eyes safe. And if you have a look at the top of his head, you can even see some fluff. For those of you who may know me, I'm also bald on top of my head and also only have fluff. That is such a great picture of these enormous animals interacting with one another. You can see almost the entire front leg there, like a tree trunk, ship mast, supporting 60% of the body weight of the elephant. You can see his little wrinkly elbow in the front leg, and it's basically the back of his ankle in his back leg. Some more baboons busy wandering through the picture there in the background. And an eland. Pundubash, I must agree with you completely. The closeness of the camera here at Afrikaans Old Donyo is just amazing. It's an incredible thing. We're able to get right up close, we can zoom in. I don't have an audio feed where I am, but I'm imagining that you can hear everything around. Sloshing of the elephant walking in the water now, hooves, some commotion around, birds, insects. Talking about insects, definitely no sight of those white butterflies, those brown veined whites. So I was mistaken. They're not starting their migration. And in fact, admittedly, their migration is from Namibia across southern Africa, not East Africa. And so we are unlikely to see a migration of brown veined whites. I was mistaken yesterday. So although they might be the butterfly in question, I might have had the identity right. The migration of the billions of butterflies only happens further south, from Namibia, west coast of South Africa, close to Etosha, across South Africa and into and out into the Indian Ocean. This guy wants some of that clean water, and this big boy is just hogging it completely. At least allowing some of the eland to come and drink. There must be a veritable army of animals waiting to come and drink at this pan after these elephants have been bullying everyone out of it to having a wrestle with it. So badly wants a drink of cold water or clean water. Gently, but definitely not allowing that. I hope you all heard that head shake. Such a great but iconic sound out in the bush. You hear that, you just know you've got an elephant close by. Harry, you'd like to know how we differentiate between two elephant herds. Gosh, Harry, that's a quite a tough question to actually answer because there's no outward sort of markers that allow us to determine which is one herd and which is the other. I'm just trying to think how I would do it. I would have a look at how they arrive and how they depart from one another. So when they're all together, beams one. Oh, this big elephant is coming in again. Gosh, look at the way they just established a hierarchy. And this big tusk guy is definitely smaller than this one on the left, and yet more dominant. Goodness me. It's coming to page respect, say hello. Resting his trunk. See how it immediately went as long and as slack as it can be. These things get heavy. So, Harry, yeah, back to your question. I would have a look and see how they arrive and how they depart from one another. So, when they're all together and they're all just standing there, for me, probably impossible to tell unless you knew the individuals intimately. Um, but they would leave separate from one another. So they take slightly different exit points and entry points into any particular place. And at that point, you'll be able to tell who's with one elephant herd and who's with the other. So that's about where where I'd say it's possible to do it. I mean, there may be others that will be better at it than me, but that's how I would do it. So conclusively, there's such a great shot of these four guys. It's almost like a postcard. Goodness. Conclusively for me, the elephant on the left is bigger in body and has two tusks, but those tusks are smaller than the elephant second left. And the elephant second left has a massively elongated tusk, but only one of them, not two, and is smaller in body, yet commands sort of instant submission from everyone else around the pan, which is interesting for me because elephant have hierarchies. These hierarchies are established in bachelor herds like this and also in areas where there's cows with calves and potential breeding opportunities. And it would seem, just from our casual observation here, that one tusk can definitely be better than two as long as it's longer, it would seem. I don't know. Perhaps you have another comment. Feel free to send it in to the comment section and see what you all think about this particular observation that we've had this morning. It's a beautiful ivory, I must be honest with you. Not that I'd like it to be anywhere else than on an elephant. I quite like elephants with their ivory, not separated from it. That's so cool. We can see the feeding notch now in the tip of this elephant's trunk. You'll notice it. Go to the tip. If you look at the tip, you'll notice that there's a notch there that's been worn into the ivory. And that is, where we go down there, you'll see that. You can see the notch in the ivory, the tip of the ivory. And that is where the elephant will be picking grass. So they'll wrap their trunk around some grass. They will then insert their tusk tip. There you go, the tip of the tusk. They'll insert that into the wrapped grass and they will then lift their head and pluck the grass out. Not the roots, just break the grass off at the stem and then bundle it up and shove it into their mouths. And that feeding notch that you see wears into the tusk over time and can be quite a characteristic of any particular elephant, help you to identify what would otherwise be a grey, wrinkly mass. There you can see that notch again. So the Ellie would curl up the grass with his trunk, insert the tusk underneath the grass and lift his head up and break the grass off. And over time that grass wears that elephant tusk down into a notch like you're seeing there. Wow, this camera is amazing. There you can see the water. Can we see the pipe? Look at that. That is so cool. We just saw the water bubbling out there. Two different types of elephant that we get in Africa. They're both from the same genus and species, and so they are subspecies of one another. We've got the savanna elephant, and then we have the forest elephant. Interestingly, and I'm not one to often sprout scientific names, but the Loxodonta africana is the savanna elephant or the African elephant, and then the forest elephant is the Loxodonta africana cyclotis. And I'm going to figure out why they called it the forest elephant cyclotis. I'm going to do that for you now, but Loxodonta means cusped tooth. And what they're talking about is the fact that the molars, which is what the elephant chews up its food with, have a slightly dished shape, cusped shape. And that's where the African elephant, the Loxodonta, gets its genus name from, or its general name from. Let's see what cyclotis means. Interestingly, I'm battling to find out exactly what the word cyclotis means, other than just a another type of elephant within the African elephant group. Um, but considering there's only two, it's quite a weird way of explaining it. But anyway, I mean, I'll carry on looking. But if any of you out there know about why and the forest elephant is called Cyclotis, why the species, the subspecies name is Cyclotis, please feel free to share it with us. You are welcome to ask questions and to send your comments. Obviously, you're welcome to. You register on the WildEarth website, and you can even subscribe and become an explorer, which has a whole bunch of benefits explained to you when you sign up. It would be great to hear from you, to be honest with you. It's lovely speaking to you all out there, knowing where you come from, where you're watching this from, where we're sitting in relation to one another. It's always quite nice. I love the way that these elephants hold their trunks. And here we have such a great view of four different positions of this elephant trunk. We've got from left to right, we've got extended or hyperextended, fully sort of extended, and then used to suck up water. We've got curled up and contracted and exploratory in the next elephant. We've got insecure, I would imagine, with the trunk in the mouth, from the sort of third from the left. And then we had curled up and resting, had curled up and resting, the elephant on the far right. But it is an unbelievable appendage, to be honest with you. I mean, what a trunk is basically is the extension and amalgamation of the top lip and the nose. So if you had to stick your thumb into your mouth in front of your teeth, underneath your top lip, and using your pointer finger and your middle finger to sort of grab your nose and then extend it out, and imagine extending that out, so bringing your top lip forward and just stretching out that whole area of your face. That is basically what a trunk is. And the muscle for the trunk, the muscles that control the trunk, sort of rest in a dish shaped depression in the skull, all the way up to right up to the forehead. So, enormous muscle attachment area, very deep muscle attachment area, which controls the movement of the trunk. Um, they have muscles that can expand and muscles that contract, very similar to our bicep and our tricep muscles. But they also have muscles that sort of curl like a DNA strand from the tip of the trunk all the way up. Helical muscles as well, which, as far as I know, no other mammal has. And that allows them to extend their trunk and compress their trunk, but without losing functionality, um, without there needing to be a balancing muscle. So quite a versatile thing. Elephants can't actually live and survive long without their trunks at all. They can take some damage to their trunks. What's happening here? I was just having a bit of a moment. Doesn't want these elephant cramping his style. So they can't really survive that long without the use of their trunk. And paralysis, there's some diseases that paralyze an elephant's trunk, or a catastrophic injury like being burnt or caught in a snare, or injured in some other way, is terminal for an elephant under normal circumstances. This guy with a big tusk now is spraying his mouth out, washing his teeth, washing his tongue. Drinking a little bit. I almost get the feeling that these guys are going to be moving off sometime soon. You can just see all of a sudden they've got a spring in their step and now they're going. I don't know if they're actually going or whether they're making space for something else, whether they've heard something in the distance. You never quite know. These animals sort of have a mind of their own. The one that came late to the party was this fairly large tusked bull on the left hand side. He hasn't been here nearly as long as these other three have. But there must be a fairly large procession of animals waiting for drinks here. These guys have been hogging the waterhole. There's some more massage giraffe coming in from the back. Difficult to say if they're male or female at this point. Again, we could guess, but I don't like doing that because often my guesses are wrong. See this elephant coming in from the right also has a pronounced feeding notch on its left hand tusk. You can see how they're smelling each other's eyes and they're interacting with each other. Yeah, we've had a fifth elephant. Looks like we've been joined by another elephant at this Africa Maldonado webcam up in Kenya. Well, up from where I am, depending on where you are in the world. Could also be down. But we are in southern Kenya in an enormous conservancy. And we've had a couple of elephant busy drinking at this pan. These are all bull elephant or male elephants. And what I thought was an elephant was one of these elephant, getting ready to move away was in fact him just greeting a new arrival at the pan. And the boys are at the pub again today. Yesterday, also around about this time, we had a group of male elephant at this pan, and also this huge tusked bull. Seems like they know where the water is. They're also coming in to drink it around about the same time, which makes sense, I suppose. If they're not moving from one place to another and they are in the local area just feeding, they would get thirsty at the same time every day because their body is using up water at a specific rate. And so it's not hard to believe that they'd arrive at a specific time. I don't think they are cognizant of it. I think it's just their body saying, let's go and drink now. And them taking roughly 24 hours to use the water that they accumulate now. Lorraine, out of the two species of elephant that we have in Africa, the forest elephant and the elephant, the savanna elephant, the ones that we're looking at right now, are the larger of the two. And you can imagine why that is, right? So the forest elephant are restricted to the dense tropical forests in Central Africa, where growth size would mean not much. It would make moving through the forest much more difficult, but it also doesn't mean anything if you're trying to look big and impressive, but you're being hidden by all the forest around you, all the leaves around you. Um, it would only make sense to get big up to a point where you could fight. Um, and you wouldn't fight that often, I would imagine, either. I don't know much about forest elephant, but it wouldn't make sense that you fight much either because females in estrus, their scent wouldn't carry very far through a jungle. Whereas on the open savanna, females in estrus, their scent travels sometimes kilometers in the breeze, calling males from all over the place. And there, having a big bulk when you're walking up to a herd means that every other small elephant gets out of your way, and it only becomes necessary to fight if there's other elephants your size around, which is feasible when you've got a massive calling card in the open savanna. And then you need bulk and you need size and you need strength to stake your claim. And so definitely the big elephant or the savanna elephants, the biggest elephant ever recorded was actually came from Angola, and was estimated to weigh around about 10,000 kilograms, 10 tons, 20,000 pounds, over 20,000 pounds, which is enormous. I don't think that we see elephant anywhere close to that size and weight. Well, I don't think there's an elephant alive today that's that big. Um, Roughly 4 to 6 tons is about what the biggest elephants roughly weigh. I mean, it's an estimate, but that's what they estimate them to weigh. So you can imagine another 4,000 kilograms. What a giant of an elephant that was. Another herd of eland coming in with some zebra. These will be different from the ones that came in earlier. They wouldn't drink, herds won't drink that frequently. So these are just the local population of animals coming in to have their time at the water. Depending on how tolerant these elephant are of these herds, they will either stick around for a little bit and have a drink, or they will move on to other water sources. They won't stick around for too long. If this water is not accessible, they will move on. Let's just see how these eland push in. Usually one comes in and then they all sort of flood in. There you go. Let's listen, hear what it sounds like. We've been so blessed with these elephant, but let's give them a chance to, I think, do their thing, and let's go and see what else we've got around. And we have Namibia and Etosha on the cards next. Honestly, never fails to astound me how quickly we can go from one habitat and one area to another. And in this particular case, for those of you who are not familiar with the African continent, we've moved thousands of kilometers west. Where we were close to the Indian Ocean, we are now close to the Atlantic Ocean. Where we were in Kenya, we've come across two different countries, and we're now in Namibia. And this is a pan, Okakwea pan, in Namibia's Etosha National Park. Um, Etosha is home to one of the world's largest salt pans. That salt pan is off to our right hand side, and also host to a different set of African animals, because this is in the Namib Desert, and unlike Kenya, has seasons, definitive seasons, a winter and a summer. And the winters are typically quite dry here, as are the summers. It doesn't rain very frequently here at all. But what we are seeing shared is a herd of elephant. And that's we've been so lucky today to have elephant at Jamala in Madikwe, South Africa, elephant at Old Donyo, southern Kenya, and now elephant in Okakwea, Namibia, and all during this morning show. These dainty little antelope that you're seeing in the foreground and off to the right hand side of the picture, they are springbuck. They do not occur in Kenya at all. What are these elephants doing? They're just hanging around next to the water. They have this most impressive ability to freeze. You can see that it's not the camera, the springbuck are moving, but those elephants are standing virtually motionless. Slight movement in the trunk. And what they're probably doing is listening to other elephant. Elephant can hear and produce sound in infrasound, which is very low frequency sound. In fact, outside of the human's ability to hear. And this low frequency sound has the ability to move through vegetation and across large distances with relative ease. And in particular, these drier areas of Africa, particularly in Etosha, where water sources are scarce and small, and where competition for resources is high, you don't want to get too many elephant around any particular resource. And so they talk to one another. And scientists have been using various forms of recording devices to listen to these very low frequency sounds and figure out that elephant talk to one another over incredible distances. And one will, one group of elephant will be, say, around a small water source, and they will move off before the next group of elephant come. And that's because they're just limiting, or they're trying to limit competition around these water sources. I, for one, found that type of stuff absolutely fascinating. I mean, I don't know how true this is, but I heard a story when I was in Namibia a couple of years ago. I heard this interesting story that far out onto the pans, and I mean, these pans are monumentally big. They literally curve away with curve of the earth. Yeah, in this park that we're looking at now, there's a mineral source, and the elephants make tracks across these blindingly white, intensely hot salt pans with no other resource to go to these mineral licks to get their minerals or get some minerals. And what they did was they figured out, using this infrasound tech, or the ability to capture the elephants communicating with each other using infrasound. And they figured out, the scientists figured out that one group of elephant wouldn't wander out onto the pans while another a group of elephant was at this mineral resource, and they'd wait for the resource to be empty before they wandered out there, so that they wouldn't be wasting effort walking all the way out into this desolate and quite harsh place and risk not being able to get what they went there for. I mean, and this is like, we're talking about distances here 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, much further than what the eye can see, that these animals are communicating with each other. And I've often noticed when elephant freeze, like the one we see now on the left hand side, when they stand frozen like that, they are listening. And once they've heard and understood the message being broadcast by other elephant, then they carry on with their days. I have a possible explanation for the definition of the or the taxonomy of the African elephant. As we were chatting a little bit earlier, we have the forest elephants in the equatorial thick tropical forests of Africa, and then we've got the savanna or bush elephant, which is the one that we're looking at now. And the one is Loxodonta africana. The other one is Loxodonta africana cyclotis. And I didn't know where the word cyclotis comes from, but having a look at its skull, the skulls of the two, the cyclotis elephant, so the forest elephant, has a concave depression in their forehead, on their skull, whereas the bush elephant has a convex depression on its skull. And so that's where it possibly comes from, the fact that it looks like an eye, a place for a third eye socket. That's about the only reference that I can find. So as you can see, testimony of WildEarth's mission is definitely to connect people with nature. And one of the ways that you can do that and help us with the mission is to pop onto our website and click the donate button. And we'll be adding your little bit to help us keep on with our mission of connecting you and others to nature. Welcome back for those of you who've just joined us, and we are still at the Okokweyo Pan in Etosha National Park in Namibia, and we were three African bush elephant, or savanna elephant. We've had a discussion today about why we have two different types of elephant. We've got the forest elephant and we've got the savanna elephant, and from a taxonomy point of view, the forest elephant has its subspecies name as Cyclotis, and I didn't know where that came from. We've subsequently managed to figure out, or at least I'm proposing a hypothesis because I can't find a definitive answer for this. So I'm proposing this as my feedback, but welcome your feedback on the topic as well. But the African elephant, like we're looking at now, if we had to look at its skull, on its forehead, sort of above its eyes, there's a convex sort of dome right in the center of its forehead. But on the forest elephant, there's a concave depression. And I got a feeling that that concave depression, when you look at the skull of an elephant, of the savanna elephant, makes it looks like it has a single eye in the middle of its forehead, and gives it this sort of cyclops-like look. And so that's my submission. But feel free to give your opinion on it. We'd love to hear from you, obviously. Send it through on our website. You just have to register there, and you can send through your feedback on where you think the forest elephant got its subspecies name Cyclotis from. These group of bull elephant are now making their way off. And you can see, for those of you who were observant, you would have noticed that they have relatively smaller tusks than our friends up at Old Donyo. But what they are doing is making their way over this rocky plain, which is so distinct. Here, this calcrete, which is basically the remnants of a sediment that was at the back of the bottom of an inland lake, an inland sea, the deepest portions of which were here at Etosha, but millennia ago, 100 million years ago. Definitely not now. Very much a desert. Goodness me, what a view. Hard to believe that something the size of an elephant can actually get any form of nutrients in an environment like this, and yet there's quite a healthy population of elephant in Etosha. Picking their way over the boulders there as they make their way out into the forest fringes. Well, bush fringes, no forest here, but out into the bush fringes. It's such a nice sighting. For some reason, I like it almost as much as I liked our pictures from Oldonia this morning. I just love the way that something this big can sort of camouflage itself into this environment when there's nothing much more than a knee-high rock around. And yet, if you were quickly scanning over this area, you wouldn't even know that there was 10,000 kilograms of elephant standing there, broken across 3 different individuals. Notice the springbuck just off left of center is defecated on this common midden that we're seeing here. We often see these springbuck doing that. Using a latrine site, which I find actually quite appealing. I'm quite a hygiene freak, and so enjoy the fact that these antelope are using a toilet and not just doing their business all over the place. Of course, it has more uses than just that, and it is talking about hierarchies and dominance. It is a way for male springbuck to assert their dominance in a non-aggressive way, which is just making sure that their scent is the one that is most prominent and most prevalent. And they do that by just defecating continuously in the same spot and making sure that their scent is the one that is the most dominant scent around. Some zebra have just made their way into the shot on the other side of the pan. They're having a quick drink. And then we've got some springbuck that have waded out into the water on the right-hand side, as we discussed the other day, celebrating the fact that they have an abundance of clean water to frolic in with no crocodiles posing any sort of danger, as well as getting cleaner water from the water in the center of the pan. So, commenting on the fact that these white rocks are so prominent in the picture here, I found some information about calcrete that I'd love to share with you. I'm going to read it because I think it's only fair on the author. Um, and I'm paying some homage to Amy Tikkanen, who wrote this. But calcrete, also called pan, is a calcium rich or hardened layer in or on the soil. It is formed on calcareous materials as a result of climatic fluctuations in arid and semi-arid regions. Calcite is dissolved in groundwater and under drying conditions is precipitated as the water evaporates at the surface. Rainwater saturated with carbon dioxide acts as an acid and also dissolves calcite and then redeposits it as a precipitate on the surfaces of the soil particles. As the interstitial soil spaces are filled, an impermeable crust is formed. That gives you feedback on what this white rock is that sort of dominates Etosha, and also why it dissolves in the water that we see around these pans. Not so much in this pan, but definitely on those water sources on the edge of the salt pan, and also why the elephant in Etosha are painted white with it. As they bath in these waters, it goes and sits on their skin and gives them a distinctly white appearance. Such a great view as more and more of these springbuck are coming in to drink at the pan today. As it heats up, they will come and replenish their water stores. They don't need to drink, but they do. And we're seeing a fairly large herd of springbuck now around this pan. I don't know if it's the largest herd that we've seen over the last couple of days, but definitely one of the largest herds of springbuck that we've seen. Looking like so many ants coming out over the plain. These wildebeest that have run in now to come and drink some water, followed by some zebra. Very thirsty. Quite interesting that these wildebeest sort of ran in the last little bit. I think they're wildebeest. They might be oryx. The definition on my screen is not that high for me to say from here. They look like oryx now. There were some shadows on them. Let's come some more. And look at how they're coming into the water. They must be dreadfully thirsty. Shame, man. Jumping straight into the water and just gulping down mouthfuls. You don't really get an impression for how fantastic. I mean, this is an incredible view, by the way. I mean, like just as a view, it's just astounding. This open plain of white rocks with some vegetation in the distance. But what isn't given a fair representation in this particular shot is the fact that the Etosha salt pan is easily one of the biggest, if not the biggest, salt pan in Africa by some margin. It's almost 100 miles long, by 50 kilometers wide, 30 miles wide in places. Can be seen from space, and there is nothing growing on it. It is a salt pan. The remnants of a massive inland lake, and started drying up about 100 million years ago. And in the process of drying up, minerals started to precipitate out and then be dissolved by rain and collect in these depressions. And what we're left with is these white rocks that you can see now, these calcareous or calcrete, which is these rocks that we're seeing lying all over the place. And as over the eons the surrounding soil is eroded away, it's left this broken up, basically crust. And it's just such a diagnostic feature of Etosha. You're not going to find this view in anywhere else. I haven't seen it in my travels in Africa, certainly. And I visited all of the big salt pans that I can. Funnily enough, without visiting the salt pans in South Africa, that is still somewhere where I need to go. But I visited the Makgadikgadi pans in Botswana, and I've visited the Etosha pans here in Namibia, and both were astounding places to be. In fact, the quietest place I've ever been in my life has been in the Makgadi pans. I ran as fast as I could for 20 minutes into the pan, and I sat down and I watched a full moon rise. And it was so quiet that I could hear my heart beating in my chest. Not anything else, not an insect, not a plane, not a whisper of a breeze, not a ruffle of a leaf, nothing. Just my heart thudding in my chest. One of the most incredible memories that I carry from my travels across this continent. Another was me spending some time at Etosha. They have these pans, which are pumped pans, for reasons that we discussed a little bit earlier. They have them at the rest camps, and very similar to how we are able to look at this pan, you can in person go and sit with your binoculars, and you can go and sit at these. You can go sit at these pans, and you can enjoy the sights pretty much 24 hours a day. And I took my sleeping bag, and we were there for, I don't know, a week or so. And I used to camp up at the pans on the chairs and just watch the procession of animals over a 24-hour period. Just unbelievable, the amount of animals that come down to these water sources. What's that oryx doing in the background there, running around like a crazy thing? Does he not know it's a desert? Obviously trying to warm up a little bit. I think this water is super chilly. But let's give the next group of animals, apart from the springbok, but let's get the next group of animals time to move in here. And why don't we go further south, another country away, to Jamala to go and see what's happening there. Goodness, and just like that, we've got another herd of elephant in Madikwe Game Reserve this time. This is in South Africa, so a little bit further east and much further south than we were at Etosha, sort of in the center top of South Africa, very far away from both the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. In the depths of our South African winter, I'm in South Africa myself personally. I'm sitting even further east of where these elephant are now, probably on the same latitude line, but about 800 or 900 kilometers further east of where these guys are. There we got some wildebeest. Those are brindled gnu, wildebeest, blue wildebeest. A small herd of them picking at the dirt, similarly to these elephant. And unlike the elephant that we've just seen at Etosha, who were white on their back from bathing with water, carrying the white sediment, these elephant are brown because they've been dusting themselves with soil and mud that carry a more iron-rich composition, and so they end up being a bit more red. So that banging that you can hear there is because they're constructing the camp. The camp burnt down a couple of months ago, and so excuse us, it's a bit much right now, so we're going to be moving on. And quick as a flash, we've gone Namibia, south to South Africa, 4 countries back up north to Aldania in Kenya. Apologies for that banging, but like I said, they're busy they're reconstructing the lodge which burnt down at Jamala a couple of months ago, and kudos to them. It's an incredible effort to try and redo a lodge and that burnt down. It's a sad thing when a lodge burns down. It's demoralizing. What isn't demoralizing is the sheer volume of animals that we have around this particular waterhole. I see we've got now 3 elephant. I'm still trying to decide if these are the same 3 or a mixture of the same 3 that we saw earlier. Some zebra and some eland. Definitely the big guy in the back is the same elephant that we had. You can see that distinct scar on his trunk, the front portion of his trunk, an old tusk injury as far as I have it, and that in combination with the holes in his ears and his general impression of size and shape make me believe that he was the same elephant that we were looking at a bit earlier, which makes the big elephant on his left probably the same one, and by extension the young one that we have in front of us here as well. What won't be the same is the eland of the zebra, and this pan has been incredible today. There's just been a ceaseless procession of animals. Gosh, look at that zebra kicking out back. Competition for the water getting fiercer. Let's listen for a while and hear what it sounds like. So a little bit earlier, we were having a chat about how male elephants develop very similar to how human males develop. Socially, I'm talking about now, or limited to socially, I'm talking about. Where the first sort of 12 to 15 years, the males are quite dependent on the female herds, where be around mom and dependent on mommies and sisters and aunties to teach them the way of things. But sort of between 12 and 15, what happens is they get more and more independent and it's noticeable by the fact that they sort of hang around um, less and less with the herd, and the distance between them increases over time until all of a sudden one day you realize that this young bull is sort of disassociated from the herd. So anywhere from sort of 15 years old to 20 years old, the males pick their own path. But often because they're still quite insecure and they lack the confidence and the knowledge to be fully independent, they attach themselves to old bull elephants. And you find it is often the case that a young bull or bulls will be in association with older bull elephants. And this isn't a herd, it's a loose association. And they hang around with each other for some time, where the younger bull elephants are learning from the older one, and the older bull elephant has some companions in his later years. Um, but what happens then is that elephants go into a period called must. Some elephant, and it's on an individual basis, some elephant have numerous must periods throughout the year. Other, other elephant have one long extended must period, and it's cyclical. They'll come into these must periods um, cyclically. And what's typically happens is they have up to a 70% increase in testosterone and this forces the males to compete with one another and also to search out females. And as these bulls mature and they get bigger and they get older, so the need to want to mate sort of dominates when they're in these must periods. And you find that they are so aggressive in these periods that no other males can hang around with them, and they become solitary and independent, and quite often build up personalities during this time. But as they mature further and become, and go into their older age, what happens is these must periods diminish in both intensity and duration, and so they become less competitive as breeding bulls. And although they're still massive, they'll be massive animals. They won't be as competitive from a breeding or competition point of view, and then they become calmer and more docile the older they get. And of course, that's when they're joined by the youngsters again, and they'll be spreading their knowledge that they've gained over all the years, what to do when, what trees to feed on, or what periods of time, where to go when there's certain things happening, drought or floods or fire, and then they pass on. That is their life story from a social point of view. I just find it quite fascinating. A lot of similarities, as I mentioned, between humans and human men and elephant, for me at least, anyway. Right, we haven't had a chance to go and visit my lady dam yet today, or any of the days, so why don't we go and see what is happening out there? Wow, some more elephants. So now this is Africam's Naledi Dam, and here we're in the Greater Kruger National Park in the Willifants Game Reserve, Willifants West Game Reserve. It's very different to Madikwe. Madikwe was an area that was re-established as a conservation area and repopulated with animals. Up in Kenya, Oldonia, where we're going, is a wilderness area that has had conservation efforts to try and harmonize people and animals. And here we're in the Kruger National Park, which is, look at this, right up. Gosh, super close. got to. I don't know if the camera's making a noise. I doubt the camera's making a noise. Definitely she can't hear my voice. It's quite typical for elephants to stand there sort of facing 360. I'm trying to see, this looks like some young females together. I don't see any babies though. I don't know what that elephant is behind this female. There's a smaller one there. It's sniffing the dung. Okay, there's a baby. Alright, so these are most likely females. I know that from the angled forehead. You can see this one on the left hand side is a very angled forehead. There's a baby there. So this is a breeding herd of female elephant. A family of elephant. There you go. See how they've trampled the dirt into talcum powder. This is a young male, obviously. And considering what we were just chatting about, he's now still too young to leave the herd and be on his own. So I would imagine that he is sort of between 12 and 15. Even though he's carrying quite a lot of weight on him, you can see he is bigger than the females around him, than his mommies and his sisters and his cousins. And they're taking quite a lot of interest in that other elephant dung that's there. I wonder if it's from the same herd, or if they're smelling something in the dung, perhaps a disease or an illness. Stirring up water. Actually, that's pretty cool. Look at that little baby there. Let's see if he's got the use of his trunk. No, a little bit. There you go. Hey, well done, little guy. Actually got to learn how to use their trunk, and quite often you'll find babies will just drink with their mouths. Gosh, this is an interesting dung pile. I don't think it's dung from the same elephant herd. There's some urine. They're all taking an intense interest in it. I think it's from another elephant, not from the same herd. Sort of some news. Oh, that little guy, we've now missed the antics of the little guy, but it's okay. We got to see him drinking, which is good. He's got the motions right. That little guy would still very much be drinking mommy's milk, and so it doesn't matter if he doesn't get all the water. He'll be able to substitute it easily enough. There he goes. Oh, look, he goes. I don't think he got anything. I think he's just practicing. This one lifting up her leg. She's got a thorn or something on her foot. Shame. It looks like it's hurting her. It's okay. These elephant, they deal with it easily enough. Great view of that. Silhouette in the bush or on the water. See this elephant standing, waiting for the rest of the herd to drink before they all move off together as a family. Another thing that's quite noticeable on this particular elephant is the fact that her tusks point straight down. And for those that have been watching this morning, you would remember that the bigger elephant had, the male elephant at least, had tusks that pointed out parallel to the ground rather than perpendicular to it. That little Ellie there. And that's because female elephant don't really fight with their tusks. They use their tusks mainly as defensive weapons and then also to feed with. They don't really need the tusks that are pointing outwards to make them look more impressive at distance, and then obviously as jousting weapons as well. See that little trunk there in the background, just snaking over the top of the water trough. I don't quite know if it's actually doing anything, that little trunk. He looks at it, there he goes there. What a great place to come and get a refreshing drink out here. It is our dry season and winter as well. We don't expect any rain, any noticeable rain, for months to come yet, only around October, the beginning of October, and it'll only really start raining here toward the end of November. And so water sources like this are vital resources to have around. You can see from that Ellie scratching its belly there that it needed to be constructed very robustly to withstand a 2 or 3 ton elephant pushing against it having a scratch. Little trunk snaking over the top again. I think it's more just trying to do what mommy and uncles and aunties are doing. I don't think that there's any ability yet to be able to drink. No water coming out the end. Doesn't understand. How are my auntie and my mom sticking their noses into the water? And water seems to stay in there when it can't work for me. Little guy. Making my day, actually. Typical kid with feet that are too big for the body. Awkwardly trying to get everything done. Goodness, but these cameras are amazing. Still a bit wobbly. Not a newborn baby, not by any means. But the fact that we can't see any tusks means that he's definitely younger than a year. Elephants get 6 sets of molars and 2 sets of tusks. Their first milk set of tusks falls out before they're a year old, and then they'll start to get their adult tusks, which then protrude out their lips. Like this one here, you can see the tusks. So those are adult tusks. There's a youngster that doesn't have any tusks, or was born without tusks. So he doesn't have his adult teeth yet, or was born as a tuskless elephant, which is relatively common. We've seen an adult cow today with no tusks. It's bullying the baby. Classic. As in some sympathy to all you mothers out there. I can sympathize exactly what you're going through. Kids just at the shops, playing around, getting in the way. You see the little guys feeling a little bit insecure. When they like that, they like to fit underneath their mom's legs, and often for years at a time won't be outside of touching distance. What's going on? No. See, this cow doesn't have any tusks. This elephant was born without tusks. I was amazed at how long these elephants' trunks can get when they relax them fully. You saw that female there, her trunk was easily 20-25% longer when she fully relaxes it. Quite possible that she could stand on it if she wasn't aware of where her trunk was. Obviously, they are. And I've never seen an elephant step on their trunk. But the variable length of these things is just, I don't know. I just find elephant trunks endlessly fascinating. Considering how many elephants are actually around this or have been around this water point, they're not actually that messy. There's a bit of water that spills out of their trunks and their mouths. There's some overshoot and overflow. They haven't really messed that much. The elephant's tail on the left hand side. There you go. So she's going to add her own pile of smells to the local area. And interestingly, it gives you an idea on how to age elephant dung. That's obviously about as fresh as it gets. And will dry out substantially over the next couple of hours, depending on the prevailing winds. Thank goodness, blocked our view from the. Would otherwise be quite a private affair, I suppose. Here we have these elephant at African Naledi Dam, busy moving off. There's a youngster, we watched him trying to drink and check his tail. That's cocktail, that's a sign of insecurity. So, or no, he's just going to go to the bathroom. I think his mommy just went, and I think he's just following suit. She's also going to go, I think. There you go. So, whole herd is adding their pile to the dam here. Gosh, amazing. Give it a good idea of how to how to age elephant dung, as we were saying a little bit earlier. This is about as fresh as it gets, as you can see, and you can see the definite color coming out is more yellow than darker brown, but as it dries out and oxidizes, I love the way these elephants are playing in the water. This is the second time we watched them splash around significantly. I mean, elephants are well known for drinking the cleanest water. We've seen that up at Aldonia today and yesterday. There's a young male. He's now he's obviously bigger and youngster, but that female has made some space for him. Let's see what he does. Drink or splash around? Playing. This is abundance of water. They just don't understand. And it's super clean as well. He's also going to slosh around. The overspill will fill this little pan, and this will be where everyone else who can't reach up into the trough would come and drink. Quite a clever design, actually. I quite like it. Yeah, because a much bigger elephant. It's a male. Let's see if he creates some space here with everybody else. Pushing in his way. Another big male. That's a female, actually, I think. Sometimes quite difficult to say, actually. Yeah, that's a female. The biggest one we see is a male, and he's just made space for an older female, even though he is bigger. A youngster. Yeah, they're playing again with this water. Blowing and stirring it about. Keen interest in the urine that the other elephant left on the floor there, left close to the dam. inspecting everything with his mouth. Like, you really are quite inquisitive, these guys. We're dominated by smell and hearing. Quick sniff under the tail, quick sniff in the mouth, having a bit of a stretch, and then off. See the bush in the background there, very different from the bush that we had at Etosha. While there is some calcrete deposits at places in the Kruger Park, it's definitely not as common as you see in Etosha National Park. This particular area dominated by a variety of different rocky outcrops, in fact. Very mineral rich, this area here. Um, Lots of bizarre outcroppings of rocks and useful minerals, manganese and chrome and iron and lots of different things that form the bedrock here. And of course, in turn, will affect what grows on them, and in turn, affect what lives on the things growing on them. So, whole ecosystem here, made up of biotic and abiotic components, the living and the non-living. Let's see what this Ellie's doing over here. Intense interest to that urine that's been left there by that other elephant. Who knows what elephant can actually smell? Definitely they're able to determine different levels of hormones, but there's some that say that they can also determine age, gender, health. I love this Naledi Dam. It's like a health spa from a hot water source. Why don't we go and have a look at what's happening at Old Donyo up in Kenya? And just like that, we're 5,000 kilometers north to a pan that's pretty much had these elephant in it non-stop since we joined them this morning, a couple of hours ago. This huge elephant bull on the left-hand side, and another one whose body is bigger but tusks are slightly smaller, and then they're two ascaris or associates. And they've pretty much been dominating the pan, although not drinking as much as what they did yesterday. We can still see water. Yet by the end of yesterday, we couldn't see anything. And they've been drinking and standing and sloshing about here for hours already this morning. This elephant with a broken tusk, this big boy here, he must have been if his other tusk was of a similar length before it broke off, he must have been quite an impressive bull, if you think about it. Big, wide spread to his tusk points, thick ivory, big elephant. Still busy drinking. Lovely patchwork sky offering a respite from the sun. Didn't afford us the chance a bit earlier, but we started to chat about the network of blood vessels that feed the ears with blood. Have a look now as this elephant opens up his ear. You can see that enormous vein that they've got sort of in the top third of their ear. And that feeds a network of, I suppose not veins, arteries. That forms a network of arteries, then arterioles, smaller and smaller, eventually capillaries. They will then have their heat transfer. Something I don't know is whether there's an artery or a vein that leaves the ear, because obviously the difference is one carries oxygenated blood and the other one carries deoxygenated blood, vein being the deoxygenated blood and artery being vessels that carry oxygenated blood. But obviously in an elephant's ear, you have arteries going into arterioles going into capillaries so that you have the most effective heat transfer. But do they go back into arteries again? Question for another day. Goodness, that is an impressive male elephant. Wow. Dwarfing that giant Cape Eland in the background. That Cape Eland is easily the size of an adult Cape buffalo. 800 to 1,000, 600 to 1,000 kilogram animal. I think when you compare it against an animal weighing 5,000 kilograms. Another eland coming out of the distance there with what looks to be an impressive set of horns. Wow, what a sight. Africa's largest antelope with Africa's largest mammal. And what an example. She looks pregnant, this one. She's coming from the back there, and you can see that she's carrying quite a round belly. She would be ready to calve then as soon as the season changes. A couple of months of carrying them, and then she will drop that baby, that calf. They've got such soft faces. Another almost postcard view. You have an oxpecker sitting on this eland. Tough to see at this distance whether it's the red or the yellow-billed oxpecker, but for those of you who have a sharper eye, you're looking at their beak. You're looking to see if you can see some yellow at the base of the beak or some red, with a difference between the two being relatively profound. They both obviously live on large animals, and as their name would suggest, they peck at things. The yellow-billed oxpecker pecking at predominantly parasites, so ticks and fleas and mites, and the red-billed oxpecker pecking at predominantly wounds, keeping wounds clean of whatever parasites are feeding on that, and then also having their fair share of ticks. But only the yellow-billed oxpecker more ticks, with the red-billed oxpecker more wound cleaning. And the type of relationship they have is called commensalism. It's a type of symbiosis that they have with one another. The oxpeckers get food, and the eland get cleaned. The oxpeckers also act as an early warning system. They're very vigilant, and quite often animals will react to their warning calls and cries in the presence of predators, even though those predators don't prey on the birds themselves. So, for instance, oxpeckers will shout at humans and leopard and cheetah and lion. They've got no reason to fear them, but they definitely know that their partners would enjoy being warned. This elephant resting his trunk, it's done enough work now, sucking up goodness knows how much water. They drink about 200 liters of water a day. And he decides to march off. Been here for a good few hours, and now at that. Ring-necked dove in the view, two of them, very common bird. Not all the elephants have left. This shot giving us a great view of the feeding notch in that central elephant's tusks. You can see how it's been shaped over the years. They are so good at placing their tusks. Absolute finesse. And yet can knock down a tree, pry down a branch, impale an adversary. And you can see now what I was talking about. That female from earlier on, her tusks were perpendicular to the ground, but parallel to her trunk. Whereas a bull elephant has tusks perpendicular to the trunk and parallel to the ground. It makes it any less confusing. Such a great view of the tusks on the flanks of the elephant with another elephant there. You gotta love these guys there. Atlanta Jules, you wanting to know if I'm able to notice if they're the same elephants coming every day. So I think that we're seeing the same elephants, Atlanta Jules. To be honest with you, I do think it's actually quite tough to say without, taking a proper screenshot of that big bull elephant, for instance, with the one tusk, and looking at the way his ears are frayed and damaged, and any marks on the tusks themselves and the relative length and any other features on the body. And these youngsters, you don't carry that much feature. I mean, this elephant in the center of the screen now, he has a very distinct notch in his tusk with some very noticeable holes in his ears. You'll see when it's backlit in the sky behind him. As does this elephant here, and then earlier on we had that elephant with a scar on his trunk. They will for sure they will for sure be noticeable if you take a screenshot and you compare the 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 pictures day after day. But elephant also don't they stick around in an area for a while and then they move. They move to another area and they can also move out and move back into an area quite quickly. Um, so So I hope that answers your question there. That over time we'll be able to build up a resource, and you'll be able to notice those types of things. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I suggest taking a few pictures of these animals and then corresponding it down there and seeing if you can see. I suspect that we've seen the same elephant over the last couple of days here, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be seeing the same elephant every day. Um, and I'm expecting them to change over some time. But carry on sending in your questions. If you observe something, I mean, I'm always astounded at everybody's ability to pick up details. And what's the zebra doing? Looks like they're wanting to have a bit of a dust bar. Quite a nice view here. Zebra are so fantastically marked, corresponding with the grey of those illies and the creamy colour of the eland behind them. Great shot. It's always so nice to end the show with something to look at, and definitely Aldonio, African Aldonio up here in Kenya is not disappointing in that aspect. A couple more minutes of the show, and we've got all these animals to pick from. Beautiful herd of zebra just made their way in. Two giant elephant in the background with some eland popping in and out of view in the background. Clouds moving across the sky, and I don't know, it looks very peaceful. Gosh, that's a big eland on the right hand side. You see how massive the body is of that animal. Huge forequarters. I don't know, just striking me as an eland that's in really, really good condition. Something to note in the last couple of minutes of the show. I think we've got a minute or so left. I just want to take the time that we have left just to say thank you. Thank you to you for all your participation, not just the questions and the donations, but just the eyeballs on the screen. We value this so much. I just want to say thank you to WildEarth for the opportunity to do this. It's just such a great way to spend some time in the day. And I want to say thank you to everyone behind the scenes who makes it all happen. So thank you, team. You guys do such a great job. And, just gratitude all around that we get to share these absolutely fantastic places. All our partners, all the collaborators doing all this stuff. And just well done to everybody. I'm going to be signing off soon. And so enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. And I'll catch up with you tomorrow. And we're just going to stick with this. I'm sure for the rest of the couple of seconds left over. And so from me, I'm over and out. Ciao.